Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exceptionally irresistible show. This is our casual chat segment where we highlight fellow entrepreneurs, fellow coaches, fellow consultants, whoever you are, we highlight you. It's all about highlighting these exceptionally irresistible individuals. There's so much to learn from them. So today we have the incredible, awesome Shmuel Reichman, Rabbi Shmuel Reichman. I'm sorry, sometimes colleagues are like, So Rabbi Shmuel Reichman, he's here with us today. We're going to hear so many golden gems from him today, and we're super excited to have him on today's show. Shmuel, how are you?
It's a pleasure to be here, Yamri. Such an honor, and really looking forward to diving deep into some amazing ideas.
Absolutely. Again, thanks again so much. I'm going to jump right into your bio. Again, this is Shmuel Reichman, and he is an incredible individual. I've heard him talk so many times, and I think this bio kind of doesn't do so much justice, but we're going to go with it still, and we're going to have Shmuel talk about some more about it. So Rabbi Shmuel Reichman is an author, a speaker, an executive coach who has lectured internationally on topics of Torah thought, Jewish medical ethics, philosophy, psychology, and leadership. He is the author of the best-selling book, The Journey to Your Ultimate Self. Love the title, by the way, which serves as an inspiring gateway into deeper Jewish thought. After obtaining his BA from Yeshiva University, he received his rabbinical Semicha from Yeshiva University's RIETS program, a master's degree in education, a master's degree in Jewish thought, and then spent a year studying at Harvard as an Ivy Plus scholar. He recently moved to Chicago with his wife and son, where he gives Torah classes and is pursuing a PhD at the University of Chicago. This is incredible. Love your journey. Love that whole educational thing and, all that stuff. Please share with us a little bit more about where you came from, how you got here. Let's get to know Rabbi Shmuel Reichman.
Yes, I'll take you behind the bio, which means very little once you get to know someone. A bio is a nice introduction, but credentials really mean very little. It's really who you are. And when I started out this journey, I had no intention of doing any of the things I'm doing now. And anyone who knows a little about my story knows that I started out as a very normal kid, and I wanted to just be a doctor, live a normal life. And, if you've heard my story, I'm going to share it very briefly. But when I was around 17, 18, I went to Israel to study for a couple of years, and my life fell apart. And I got very... I'll tell you basically what happened is one day I was walking and I felt this pain in my stomach, and that pain shot to my head and I lost consciousness. Wow. And if you ever passed out before, they usually just wake up. I didn't. I felt this painful struggle to wake back up. And when I finally got up, I literally thought that I was dying. I thought that I had just escaped death, and I had no idea what was happening. I went to the doctor and they had no idea what it was either. Maybe I ate something, maybe it was a fluke accident, but then it happened the next week. And then it started happening again and again. And I, every single time, thought I was going to die. And I started having a midlife crisis when I was 17 years old. I started asking, God, why are you doing this to me? I'm not a bad person. I'm not trying to hurt anybody, kill anybody. I'm just trying to live my life. But I also started asking myself real questions. Why am I here? What's my purpose? I don't know how much longer I have to live, but what am I actually living for? And I never asked myself that before. I never really asked real questions like, what can I do with my life? What kind of person am I capable of becoming? And I devoted whatever time I thought I had left to seeing what I was capable of. And I started pushing myself. I started pushing myself intellectually, spiritually, physically, started reading and thinking, seeking out mentors, rebbeim, coaches, teachers. And I started to explore what it is that I was capable of. And thank God it turned out that this crazy thing was something called vasovagal, where it's not fatal at all. You just have to know what causes it, what brings it on, and also just make sure you're not standing up when you pass out, because then you can hit your head, have a concussion, and that's the most dangerous thing that can happen. But even though I was able to get past that phase, the passion never stopped. And I sought out greatness. I sought out what greatness was. I would interview CEOs and executives and high performers and world leaders and speakers, and just pick their mind and try to understand how they thought, how they developed themselves, how they got to where they got. I started to become a learner of success. And yes, I've studied at Harvard, I studied at University of Chicago, I have lots of degrees, but that means nothing at the end of the day. What means something is who you are and what you become and how you live your life and what your experience of life is. And I started to mold and craft that. And then it became this extraordinary journey of basically a very simple premise. I want to achieve greatness and I want to help others do the same. And that's become the most extraordinary journey of all time. Understanding what greatness is, understanding that when you ask that question, you realize there's a real question to think about. And then you start to explore the different ways of pursuing it and how to really create the ultimate life and help others do it as well.
Wow.
So that's kind of the journey so far, and we are just getting started. That's all I can say.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many parts of your journey that is just so interesting, and I relate to it on so many levels. I heard you say this story several times, and it's brand new every single time. So it's incredible.
By the way, I have to make it brand new every time because it's one of those things where I know that there are certain people who've heard me say it before. And I feel bad because that's not why they're here. They're here for us to dive into ideas, for us to explore things. But for anyone who hasn't heard it before, if I just kind of like go through the motions and say the story, then you lose them. It's like, oh, okay, he's sharing the story.
Right.
But for me, one of the most important things is for people to realize they have a story to tell.
Right.
In order for you to realize you have a story to tell, every time I share it, I want to spark that, because also a lot of people say, oh, so I have to have a near-death experience to start really living my life. It's like, no, I want to simulate that for you. So you wake up and realize, wow, I'm actually also, I have a limited amount of time here and I want to do something with my life. So my goal became to create that artificial wake-up call where you don't have to have the near-death experience to say, wow, what am I doing with my life? And you might be an entrepreneur, you might be an executive, you might be a coach, you might be just trying to be successful in your family life, in your spiritual life. Right. But the moment you wake up to the realness of life, you start to take yourself seriously and you start to take life seriously. You start to see what you're capable of. So the first time that I tell that story in the same way I told it the last time, in a way that's just going through the motions, that's the moment I lose it. That's the moment I lose the audience. That's the moment I lose why I'm doing what I'm doing. So every single time, I don't have a script. I don't have like, this is what I'm supposed to say. I try to get back into that headspace and I try to make it that if you heard the story before, it's still new. And if you haven't, you feel like this is the first time I'm saying it. And that's something where, for me, because I do these things all the time and I have to tell my story all the time, that's probably the hardest part, is the first 5 minutes of these things, where I have to make it sure that it's as real as possible and I show up as genuine and vulnerable and real as the first time I shared it. So I'm glad you said that.
I'm definitely, and again, it's definitely it. And I say, and I often have the same issue, my business partner and I, one thing that I love about our partnership, Baruch Dubrow and myself, the reason why I love it so much is because, I have all these, credentials and experience and all that kind of stuff. A lot of my career was spent in university as well. I'm also getting my doctorate, all that kind of nice stuff. And he doesn't have all that, And then I have these near-death experience story as well, this massive struggle and all that kind of stuff, where he doesn't have necessarily the same level as the way I do, and what you're saying is really, really critical, because, and it really ties into, the thing that I wanted to dive into, was that at some point we all struggle, all struggle at some point with something, and it's this consistent thing that we're always struggling, and really that question is that we have to consistently ask ourselves, what is it that we are going through? Okay, so you and I, let's say, had a near life death experience, whereas others maybe don't relate to that on the same level. But I think where they could relate, and I want you to expand a little bit more about this, that struggle. Okay, so I think that mindset, when you were going through these hardships, on your level, what was your mindset? Like you shared how you said, no, I cannot live with this, in the sense, like, I have to change. I deserve better. But what were you here in your mind? What was that shift? It's very easy to, what we call, fall into that captivity of that mental prison when, oh, why is life happening to me? Why is this, my life is terrible, life is ending or whatever. But on any level, on any struggle, where were you here in your mental capacity? Where were you when you did that shift? I think that's where people could relate.
Powerful question. It's a powerful question. And the first and most important thing is for people to realize that you don't struggle when you have a near-death experience. Life itself is struggle. Life itself is constant pain. And you're either in a struggle, coming right from a struggle, or heading right towards a struggle. And there's a very deep reason for that, which is that the only way you can grow and evolve and become anything more than you are is by resistance and getting out of your comfort zone. And not just in Torah thought, but in religious thought and psychological thought, struggle is the name of the game. Challenge creates you. You don't become great despite your challenges. You become great because of them. And just think about how you build muscle. You need to rip your muscles apart. Without that external and internal resistance and push and force, you're just going to stay the way you are. And there's nothing more painful than staying the way you are. If you think there's going to be pain and growth, it's a lot more painful to stay in the misery of where you are. And one of the things I love doing is I get to coach and consult for CEOs and leaders and entrepreneurs, and they all realize at a certain point that they're stagnating, right? Because everyone who's achieved a level of success stagnates, and they get kind of like caught up in the fact that they've already achieved some success and they just coast, and they're not happy, because happiness and fulfillment comes from growth and progress. And unless you're pushing yourself or getting pushed, you're not going to be fulfilled or happy with where you've come from. And if you realize the balance of being happy with how far you've come, but always wanting more, and realizing that as human beings, we are growers, then you never want to stay the same. You always want to become more. You fall in love with the journey. And the most important shift I had back when I was going through those struggles was the realization of the power of perception. So every aspect of life, and this is why I've become an entrepreneur, I've become, I own a business, I've become someone who's ambitious in that front. But the way I started was purely as a philosopher, an intellectual, a spiritual yearner. And it very much came from a place of, I want to understand life. I want to think, I want to contemplate. And when you realize the power of perception, which is that every aspect of life is an avenue, a window, a gateway into possibilities. So if you think about the concept of being human, think about the concept of purpose, the concept of challenges, the concept of success, the concept of greatness, those are all just words. But what they mean is not so clear. And most people, they accept the first definition they receive, whether that's in a class, from a parent, from a teacher, from a friend, and they just go with it. And until it's disproven, they have this bias of an approach. But once you understand the power of perception, which is how do you perceive anything, it's a matter of choice. And you get to choose how you perceive. So how do you perceive yourself? Your identity, your self-worth, your sense of mission and purpose, your capacity. When did you define yourself? When did you say, this is all I can be? And I started to realize that I had never given myself permission to become more than I was. And that I cared a lot about what other people thought of me, but I never really thought about what I thought about myself, independently of what other people thought of me. Most people get their self-worth from what they think other people think of them. Most people become what they think other people want them to become. And we don't know what other people think of us. So we spend our entire lives living the shadow life of trying to play this game where we don't even know the rules. No one was ever going to tell you what they think of you. They don't even know how to articulate what they think of you. And they never going to tell it to you. So I stopped playing that game. I just stopped caring about what people thought, not in an irresponsible way where I started to live a life valueless in the sense of I don't care what people thought of me, but I started to stop playing the social game of I'm doing everything for social acceptance. And I started to say, I'm going to live a life of truth. I'm going to devote my life to the truth. Now, I am a rabbi. I'm obviously very spiritually focused on Torah and Judaism, but I went deeper and deeper and deeper into everything that I'd taken for granted. And I started to open up. And that's what it means to be a thinker. It means to question, but not for the sake of rejection, but for the sake of deepening. And you start to explore, you start to expand, you start to build sophistication, nuance, you start to qualify things that were so undeveloped, and you start to build this oneness. And if you know the way that your mind works, it's a neural system where everything interconnects. And most people, they don't even know what they know. They don't even know what they believe. And if you start to open up your own mind, which the best way to do that is to get it outside of yourself, to write it down. And that's really what changed my entire life, is starting to write everything down, every thought, every idea, every opinion, everything I've ever heard, everything I was learning. You start to see yourself outside of yourself, and you start to say, that doesn't make sense. I think this and I think that, but those contradict each other. It has to be something a little more nuanced. You have to either reject one or build some form of synthesis where you qualify them and build something that actually works. And when you start to do that with a million different things, you start to build a real mind. And that's what it means to become someone who's a thought out individual. It's when you start to think about what you think about. You start to build yourself from the inside out. But to do that, you have to really confront who you are. So I started to ask myself, who am I? What do I believe? What do I think? And I started to answer those questions and to see what it was. And then once I saw what I was, I could say, okay, this is where I want to go. This is who I want to be. And the moment you start living life like that, where you take yourself seriously, you start to realize that there's a self to build, a self to, by the way, in Jewish thought, you're not building yourself, you're expressing who you are at root. So it's not this creation, this artificial molding of, you know, Michelangelo was once asked, how do you build these sculptures? It's amazing sculptures. He says, you all see a slab of stone. I see the sculpture inside the slab of stone. I just rub away the rubble on the outside and reveal what's already there. So in Torah, that's the idea. It's you're becoming you. But to become you, you have to get in touch with who you are. How do you get in touch with who you are? You have to spend time with yourself. You have to literally spend time talking to yourself, thinking. If you want other people to like you, how is that possible if you don't like yourself? Most people don't like spending time by themselves because they feel very empty with the emptiness that they confront, which is that they're empty inside. But the moment you start feeding your mind and stretching and building and creating and thinking, you start to fall in love with spending time by yourself. It doesn't mean that you don't also love spending time with other people, but you realize that life is so full. And the moment you start to go on that journey, you start to realize that everything you think, everything you believe can be explored, deepened, and become so much more. And that becomes the most incredible journey. So what ended up seeming like the worst thing that ever happened to me just like woke me up into the most incredible journey. And the moment you go on that journey, there's no going back. Because most people are sleeping. And I'm not a pessimist, I'm not negative, I'm not like, oh, everyone's sleeping, but that became my mission, is to wake people up in the deepest way. Not telling them, oh, you're sleeping, but telling them there's so much that you can experience, accomplish, and contribute to the world by literally becoming your best self. So that's like the name of my sefer, the name of my book is A Journey to Ultimate Self. The name of my course, my masterclass is Self Mastery Academy. Everything I do is built on the premise of synthesizing the deepest wisdom of life with inspiration, motivation, and articulation in an organized way that's systematic and much more than fluffy, inspirational, motivational ideas. And that's become the mission. And it's literally, as I can say, we're just getting, but it's been the most amazing journey.
It's incredible. I mean, so much of what you're saying, and I mean, like, there's so much to dig, and there's like only really like a half an hour to like 45 minutes for this show. Like, we could spend hours just on these, you know, expanding on each golden nugget that went through here. I mean, there's so much to take out from. But what I'm really hearing, and I think the most, like, really like the most basic of what I'm hearing, is that no matter what struggle you're going through, first of all, everybody wants to live this, you know, this free life in a sense. And the way I personally interpret this free life means free of worry, free of, you know, financial freedom. Like I don't want to feel like I'm owned by somebody or something. Like I don't want to be sold to my job in a sense. What I'm hearing from you is that it is specifically through the struggle, in your case, your struggle. But then you're seeing this with all the CEOs, with all the people that you're working with. They all have something in their life. Sometimes it's that struggle of even identifying your true self. You know, who am I in a sense? So by questioning that struggle in a sense of like, why is this happening to me in a sense. You're from my understanding and from hearing what you're saying is that is the actual catalyst to that free life that you want to live. You want to talk a second about that, or?
Sure. No, it's a very powerful point. I mean, freedom is a very deep topic because there's so many ways to understand what the ideal of freedom is. I mean, we like to, a lot of people, what they think they want most in life is freedom. Right? They want financial freedom. They want freedom. A lot of people, by the way, what they really want is freedom from responsibility. They want to have no pressure to do anything. They just want to have everything taken care of, and they want to relax. But that's not what we really want, because the moment you get there, you're going to become bored. You're going to become despondent. You're going to basically realize that you want something else. Right. And what people really want is they want the freedom to become everything it is that they're capable of becoming. And they feel like everything, like, for example, they feel caged by society. They feel caged by having a job they don't want. They feel caged by not having enough time to spend doing the things they want. They feel caged and they feel literally shackled by other people's opinions of them. A lot of people, right, they feel so insecure. I speak to so many people who are literally doing amazing things. Like they are, high level achievers, and they have no confidence. They don't think they're good enough for themselves. And a lot of that comes because they either don't think they're good enough for other people, or because they have such high standards, they never learn how to accept the journey. They always want to be better, but it comes at a cost where they want to be better and therefore they hate where they are. And that's a freedom that they don't understand they can give to themselves by giving themselves permission to grow, right, as opposed to saying I have to be there. Because once you get there, you're going to want more. So the moment you realize that the concept of freedom is something to think about, because it can be freedom from something, or it could become freedom to do something. And what I like to think about, and this is the idea of Pesach, of Passover in Judaism, is that we became free from the Mitzrayim, the Egyptians, but then we became slaves to God. Right? We became Avadim Hayinu, but then we became Avdei Hashem, we became servants to God. Right. We accepted the commands, accepted the Torah. Why is that freedom? But the greatest freedom is the opportunity and responsibility to live according to the truth, to live the highest life possible, to live a life of responsibility, of purpose, of commitment, of meaning, of growth. And as opposed to wanting to be free from responsibility and free from financial burdens and free from all the things that we think we want to get away from, the greatest form of freedom is realizing that you want to be free to walk into your best self. And by the way, there's another aspect, which is freedom from your lower self. So every time you make the wrong decision, you eat the wrong food, you say the wrong thing, you just make that really, really bad decision that you really don't want to, but you still want to. Like, how does that work? You don't want to do that thing, but you do that thing. You self-sabotage. That's the name of the game in success, is we are our own worst enemy. We always hold ourselves back from success. So freedom from that part of us, where you build the consistency and the continuity, and you get rid of procrastination, and you build motivation to really start living life the way you've always wanted to. Like, we all get inspired. Like right now, someone's listening to this like, wow, that's amazing. We love inspirational ideas, but then we go right back to our life because and that's why I used to just love speaking on stage to thousands of people. The reason I love coaching and consulting is because I like implementing ideas so that people can actually take advantage of what could be and turn into reality. And when you read my book, you listen to a speech, you can do it on your own. But when I get to really work with people, I get to make sure that they follow through and keep them accountable. But the greatest form of freedom, without a question, is the freedom to express your best self, to actualize your potential, to live the highest life spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, physically, financially, in relationships, and your impact, living out your purpose. That is the greatest freedom that we can ever yearn for.
So true. That's so true. And we share this as well, where we talk about, it's great to live that free life. I mean, we all deserve it. We all, that, I think that is, in a sense, the purpose of life, is to live this quote unquote, free life. And I love how you really articulated it perfectly. It's just that we sometimes don't know what that free life really looks like. And then even within that quote unquote free life, there's still another level. And what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that there's kind of seems to be this 2-level thing. Like, okay, I'm living some kind of meaning and I'm some kind of purpose and I'm living in this free life. But there's another level of thriving. There's a level of like living with this, like maybe I have this responsibility. I recognize that my struggles will still be there for the rest of my life, and maybe get new ones. And struggle again could mean multiple things, challenges, hardships, roadblocks, whatever you want to call it. But I'm learning how to take that struggle and constantly feed this ever growing learning thing within me. And that is actually my thrive. It's where I see thriving as the exact opposite of that captivity, that cage life that you were talking about earlier. The exact opposite of that is that thrive, in a sense. Take that responsibility, take that ownership, take that, but really learn how to use it and see it as the blessing that it actually is.
Yeah, no, I think that's a powerful approach. I mean, thriving. Remember, by the way, this is once you engage in the power of dialogue, you realize that words are just words.
Sure.
Right? And the moment you open them up, you kind of realize that the word free and the word thrive, I mean, we can talk about in Jewish thought, the Lashon HaKodesh, the Hebrew language is a little different, but especially in English, what the word means is very subjective. But the moment you create distinction and say, okay, thrive, let's say thrive means something different than freedom, what could that be? So what can we associate with that? So the way that I would associate thriving to freedom is, like you said, that next level where you realize that human beings are incredibly simple and incredibly complex, right? We're just human beings, but we also have a lot of different aspects to our life. And I mentioned very briefly, we have spiritual aspects. So what do you believe is the nature of metaphysical reality? What do you believe is the purpose of life? What do you believe is the meaning of existence? Do you believe in a lot of deeper fundamental principles and ethos and axiomatic ideas of life? And then you have intellectual aspects of yourself where you process, you think, you articulate, you compare, you contrast, and you start to build intellectual depth, intellectual, you try to evolve as an intellectually, cerebrally evolved being, where you're not just living blindly and just walking and doing, but you're able to process, you're able to sit down and say, okay, let's try to make sense of things. And then you also have emotional life where you feel certain ways about certain things. And a lot of people don't know how to control their emotions. They don't know how to maximize and enhance and create their emotional state. They're just literally subject in prison to whatever they're feeling. And when you learn how to create your emotional state as opposed to just become literally in a prison of your emotional state, your life changes. And you have your physical life, right? Exercising, eating healthy, sleeping. How are you doing? If you want to bring energy and vibrancy to any element of your life, professionally, in your relationships, spiritually, intellectually, you need to be at your best physical shape. And a lot of people, especially when they're working on other areas of life, they just ignore their physical state. And what about your relationships? How are you doing with your relationship with your spouse, with your kids, with your colleagues, your friends, at work, with yourself, with God? How are your connections? And then you want to think about how are you doing financially? Are you struggling? Are you working paycheck to paycheck? Are you making it? Are you thriving, flourishing? Are you able to do anything you want to do, impact wherever you want? Financial success is literally impact. The moment that you're no longer worried about paying the bills, you can start thinking about how you want to impact the world. You can impact the world with ideas or funding ideas. And if you want to think about your life in terms of mission-oriented, you want to become financially successful. And then all of this connects to purpose. Like, what type of life are you living? How do all these come together? So thriving would be twofold. Number one is to realize that most people are really doing well. Let's call it free. They're really, successful in maybe one, two, maybe three of these areas of life, right? If you're doing well financially, how are you exercising? How are you doing in your marriage, right? How are you spending time with your kids? If you're doing well spiritually, how are you doing with your emotional well-being? How are you doing on your financial success? If you're exercising every day, are you spending time learning and thinking and reading? Are you whenever you give attention to something, you take away attention from something else. And very few people are thriving in that sense that they are pushing forward on every one of these areas.
Right.
So when you start to take yourself seriously and realize that you have all these different categories and you say, okay, I might be doing really well in one, two, or three of them, but I'm really struggling in the others, and I'm going to push everything forward one notch. So I'm going to keep it might be just keeping my momentum of things that are going well. Let's say I'm doing well in my physical health, I'm doing well in my marriage, but I'm really struggling financially. I'm not really learning, I'm not really thinking, I'm not really connecting.
Right.
So now I'm going to start pushing a little forward in those areas. And it could be I choose one at a time. It could be I choose to go all of them, but just a little bit. You have to understand there's a science to growth. You don't want to overwhelm yourself. But the next stage of thriving is not just succeeding on all these fronts, but integrating them together. And that's the power of synthesis and harmony, where you realize that intellectual growth feeds into spiritual growth, and physical health feeds into emotional well-being, and emotional well-being feeds into being focused, present, able to really think. And that allows you to be very present and fully vibrant and focused on when you're with your wife or when with your husband or when you're with your kids or when you're at work. And then you can really be focused and ambitious and inspired and motivated professionally. And then you can think about your impact. So everything connects to everything. And most people are living fragmented lives where they're doing really, really well at one thing, but not only are they allowing everything else to fall apart, but they're not finding a way to make what's working impact all the things that aren't working. And also to make what's working impact whatever is working, so that you're not just a person that has all these random parts to yourself, but you build something beautiful. It's like, if you know, when I was 17, I taught myself to play music. Right? You see a guitar and piano behind me. So music is just a bunch of notes. It's like dunk, 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 dunk. What makes it music? What makes it music is when, number one, you're playing the right notes. So it's great notes, but you're also playing in the way where they melt together into a oneness, into this interconnected, synthesized, integrated structure, so that you don't hear the notes anymore. You literally hear this flow, and it's beautiful. You just hear the music. And most people, their lives are notes. It's not music. But when you learn how to build that synthesis where your life is working, it makes sense. You don't, I mean, everyone knows what's holding them back. Everyone knows deep down what they just have given up on, and the thing they just kind of put on the side, they're just not going to work on that. It's like, but the moment you acknowledge that, and that again is the idea of a challenge. The challenge, the thing that's not working, is going to help you become better. That's when you start living that next level life, right? It can go from okay to good. It can go from good to great. It can go from great to extraordinary. But the question is, are you willing to see what you're capable of? Like, are you willing to go into the unknown and take that next step? Are you willing to say, yes, I've been living this way for the past 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, but something more. Like maybe I can do it. That's when you start to thrive. And no one is thriving to the extent that they could, because there's always more to accomplish. There's always a higher level to attain. And when you start to fall in love with the journey, fall in love with the process, that's the greatest recipe for a thriving life, is to say that, yes, there's so much more for me, but I'm not dying to get there. I'm loving the journey of growth, of learning, expanding. It's like people who don't exercise, they hate going to the gym. It's the most uncomfortable, painful thing ever. But for me, like, my highlight of my day is exercising. It releases endorphins. It's where I have a lot of my greatest ideas and thoughts. It changes the way you see it once it becomes something you enjoy. So there's so much here. And obviously, when you talk about the science of life, you can talk forever about it. But falling in love with the process of becoming more in all areas of your life is the greatest superpower. Like, the love of learning and the love of the process is probably the greatest superpower that human beings can ever develop. And the moment you get that, the moment you start to develop that, your life will change forever.
Yeah. And you know, just to, like, in one word, really, to summarize everything that you said is, and I couldn't agree with you more. I also interpret thriving as, you know, growing in every single area of your life, not just one over the other, with those priorities. I tell people, get your priorities straight. You know, sometimes it will be, you know, at certain times you're going to have seasons, you know, where, you know, certain times you'll be working more in one area of your life versus another. But as long as you know, like, hey, you know, today I'm here, I'm going to be here, you know, you just have to get your priorities straight, in a sense. And that's ultimately what, if I was to summarize in one word, you know, what you articulated extremely well. You have magic with words, so and that's something I absolutely love about you.
Well, the magic of words, I didn't mention this earlier, but the magic of words, actually, when I was right before the Visa Vig, right before I was passing out every couple of weeks, I lost the ability to speak for a
Wow.
couple of years. As in, every time I spoke, it felt like a dagger was stabbing my throat. So I was able to speak, but every single time I spoke, it hurt. So I had to judge and basically say, is it worth speaking to this person? And is it worth saying what I'm about to say? And for years, I had to measure every word I said.
Wow.
And what ended up happening is that I ended up valuing speech in a way I never had before. And I also started to value ideas. I valued thought because I couldn't speak so much. I was thinking a lot more. And the moment you measure your speech, the moment you stop taking your speech for granted, you start to realize the power of communication. And so much of what I do in life is take very abstract, deep, philosophical, mystical concepts and try to make them as clear, organized, and accessible for people who otherwise wouldn't have access to it, because to engage in those types of ideas, usually the people who do that don't know how to communicate, right? They're definitely not inspiring, but they also don't, like, they're in that world. And the people who are not in that world, they just think that it's off limits for them. And what I essentially devoted my life to before I became an entrepreneur was to share the deepest, most incredible spiritual, philosophical, and psychological content in a way that everybody can connect to it.
Wow.
And then it turned into a question of, how do I make a living out of this? Because it's very hard to monetize your content. And most people start out as dreamers and as creatives, but then they give it up because they just can't make a living, or they sell out and they just basically do whatever it takes to make a living, but give up the original passion and mission, and they work for someone else, and that person decides what they say, how they say it, what the mission becomes, and that wasn't going to happen for me. So that's really why I became an entrepreneur. It's why I went into the business world and got all those degrees, and now it's why I do all my coaching and all my high performance consulting and things like that. It's to finance the mission of really helping people live that life of truth, where truth itself is inspiring, but it's the only way to live life. And if you're not living that way, you know there's something missing. And the moment you start to live that way, as I've said a couple times, there's no going back. It's the only way to live life.
Love it. Love it. All right. So like the last minute or so, we're just going to spend time on, if there was a dream mentor, in a sense, dead or alive, doesn't matter. But if there was somebody like as a dream mentor that you could ever have, who would that be and why?
So that is a question I spent the past decade thinking about. And the reason why is because I live a very different type of life. A lot of people, they devote their life to one area, to one thing. So ideally for me, it would be one mentor who has mastered every aspect, every area of life. So for me, that's, Kol Torah Kul, all of Torah. That's in the Torah world, that's all of Shas, that's the Talmud, all of Torah, all of the Bible, all of Midrashim, all of Chazal, the Machshava, the Musar, self-development, philosophy, all aspects of Torah thought, every aspect of Torah thought, but then also every realm of Mad, every realm of the world of physical wisdom, so philosophy and psychology and politics and physics and neuroscience and understanding chemistry and biology, and in the business world, entrepreneurship and high performance, and in the realm of physical health and music. And the problem is that doesn't exist. And very simply, the reason is because to develop mastery, you have to devote your life to it. But there is a solution. And this is how I basically built my entire brand. It's how I built my life. It's how I model success, is that I don't find one person who is going to be my mentor. I find the very best in every field I want to pursue. And I immerse myself in their world. So it might be they're living and I have a personal relationship with them. It might be that they passed away a while ago. It might be they passed away thousands of years ago. But what I do is I find the very best in every area. And a lot of people, they choose one mentor and they take everything that they have that's incredible. They also take all of the things that are not so incredible, because that's what so like whatever, like this person is like wise beyond his years and is financially successful, but he has horrible health, horrible relationships, and he doesn't really know anything about this area of life. But that's my mentor. So I'm going to just follow his footsteps, and maybe I won't take his advice on things he's not good at, but I'm not going to seek to supplement that with someone else who's doing better. But that's the way to succeed. And in the Jewish world, you have a lot of people have a couple of rabbeim, right? They have a couple of teachers. One rabbi is going to be for personal matters. Another rabbi is going to be for halachic legal issues. Another rabbi is going to be for this. And very often people specialize. And when you specialize, there's nothing wrong with specializing, but don't seek their mentorship in the area that they don't specialize in. That's
Right.
important.
Right.
So for me, it's you want to find the best in every area of every field, of every specialty in wisdom, in life, in relationships, in entrepreneurship, in finances, in music, in building your brand, building your business, and you want to find out how they've devoted 50 years to becoming the best at what they did. You can do that in a couple weeks, a couple months at the most, and then integrate that into your project. So now you're basically learning from the best in this, and 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 you build it together like that harmony and synthesis where you have all these different areas of your life, right? Spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, physically, relationships, finances. If you can find the best in every aspect of life and then integrate that into your life, that is the best formula for success. And then you create your mentor, which is a conglomerate of the greatest mentors of all different aspects of life. And then you say, I'm not going to be limited by time and space. I'm not going to be limited by who's alive and who's not alive. I'm also not going to be limited by taking the best from this person, just accepting what they're not good at. I'm going to start building. And then you start building this like conceptual mentor. And you also start building yourself. And that is perhaps the most important lesson I learned, is that no one's going to build it for you. Because what you want is different than what other people can give you. You have to, it's like, I'll give you a great example. A lot of people, they go to a school, university, and I've been to a lot of universities. A lot of people, they just become what the university wants them to become. Like they become the system. The only way to maximize education is to use the system, because the system's not designed for you. It's designed for the anybody, the avatar, the highest common denominator, lowest common denominator of the human being, right? It wasn't built for you. But what you can do is you can say, this is what I want. This is what this system can provide me with, and I'm going to supplement it with everything that it's not giving me. And once you start to realize that no one's going to build your life for you, you have to build it yourself. That means developing your self-awareness, developing your values, developing the way you see the world, developing how you're going to live your life, and then building your mind. Not saying this is what this person said and that's my life, but saying I'm going to start thinking, building, creating, and achieving the version of myself I know I'm capable of becoming. And it takes the confidence to say, and by the way, this is the freedom of responsibility. People don't want to take on the responsibility of taking control of their own life. They just want other people to tell them what to do, what to think, and how to live. But the moment that you say, Hashem, God created me for a purpose, and it's my job to figure out what it is I'm supposed to become, you stop having other people run your life for you, and you start saying, I'm going to build myself. And then you start seeking out mentors, you start seeking out teachers and coaches and consultants, you start seeking out people who have done it, and success leaves a trail. You start learning from people who have done it, and you can build something so much better than what they built, because you can say, I'm going to take everything you've devoted your life to, I'm going to add it to myself, and then find someone else. And that's incredible.
Love it. Shmuley, this has been incredibly real, absolutely incredible. Hey, audience, if you weren't blown away until now, rewatch this if you had to. This was absolutely incredible. Rabbi Shmuel Reichman can be reached at his website, shmuelreichman.com. You could get so much more and more from, all the wisdom that he had to share. And he has that book. Go check it out. It's a great journey. The masterclass, go check it out. There's so much to learn from Rabbi Shmuel Reichman. He has so much to offer. So again, Shmuley, thank you so much for this time. And that is concluding our show. Hey, this is the show where we highlight you, because we believe that you have a fingerprint and it is your time to leave a mark on the world. So we're all unique. We're all exceptionally irresistible. And we invite you onto the show. Come share with us your story. Come share with us your wisdom, your golden nuggets. We want to highlight you. So please reach out to us. There's so many ways to reach out to us, exceptionallyirresistible@gmail.com, or, through LinkedIn, through YouTube, through any other way. We want to highlight you. So that does conclude our show for today. This was, again, incredible. Rabbi Shmuley, thank you so much. And
Pleasure is all mine.
joining. See you all soon.